These are the tools that we're using in sculpting this dry stack rock wall. And why these are significant is these different tools allow me to go ahead and press into the foam quite, far in some places to open these large gaps. And that's what I needed. I need these large gaps between with no mortar to go ahead and show, the dry stack and things like that, in deference to the reference picture. So what I have here is, it kind of how it starts out. I start with a pencil and I draw, and then I'll cut it in, and then I'll come back and draw some more. And then along the way, I don't choose just one like texturing method. I've seen folks where you use your balled up aluminum foil, and that works fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I choose to use a bunch of different methods. Number one, I've got these rocks. These are just different rocks that I found in the yard and stuff. This is one of my favorites. I use this in the video. And that's for going, into these areas. And what that does is I'm bringing in that texture into this foam when I'm using it. The other thing is, just the flat sides of it or these sides of it, I use that and press in here. And you can make, major portions of the wall kind of stick out or recede or whatever. So rocks are a big part of my texturing. The other thing is these little brushes. Each of these is set up in kind of coarse to medium to fine. And what you'll see here is this one. See, it's a newer steel brush. The brushes haven't been all flexed and blown out. So what this tends to do is it makes these big, deep, well, not deep, but holes, kind of punches, into the rock face. What will become rock face, it's obviously pink foam. I think we know that. Should have probably said it. But then this one is brass. It's a little bit more splayed. So it's going to get those little tiny pins, the ends of those wire brushes, they're going to permeate there, but it's not going to be like as rough as this, not like as high of a, coarseness. And then the last one here, I actually use this for shaping areas of the foam. So kind of like I was saying with the rock, this one is just, it's steel, but it holds the shape and it's almost kind of, conical or rounded. And so what I do with this is I actually use this to push in really hard on the foam when I'm working with it. Here's a piece I can kind of show you what it does. When I'm pushing on the foam with this one, it pushes everything down. See that? And it makes that kind of an impression. It's a really, really nice texture. This one, I don't want to push as hard because you see what it does. It's being brass, I could mess these up. So I don't push as hard as the steel. But see, that's what that one does. You can kind of hopefully get some more shadow in there to see see, it's not as fine as that and stuff, but it's finer than this one. Here's the first one. Watch this. This is what I'm talking about. See those big punches, those big bullets, those big chunks that it does. So each of these little guys does a wonderful job of bringing texture in, and I use them all. I don't just, like I said earlier on, I don't just use one thing. Now the other tools, these are neat. These are like sculpting tools for clay or polymer, I think is what they sell them for these days. They've got these steel balls on the end, varying sizes, really nice. And then they've got these little rubber ends on the other side, which I do use. But this stuff is pretty tough, so I tend to use these hardened sides much more. And this is where I'm going in and I can use that to dish something out, or, I can use this to trace instead of the pencil. It's just different options. I like to have different options. One of the other things that's neat is when I'm working on this, and in the video, it's a members only video because it's for, coaching, is varying the depth of the individual rocks and pressing them in. And so this is one of the tools I use for that. This is just one of those, It's not a dental tool. It's actually a sculpting tool, and you can find them in like hobby stores and stuff like that, art stores. And you're pushing the entire rock in, and then you're using that edge to kind of define edges, you know, separating this rock from that rock. So this is a great tool too. And it's, you know, each of these has like different things on the ends for different purposes. And then the last ones I use, these are just classic clay sculpting tools. They've been around for eons. I've got, as a matter of fact, I've got some of my father's, these aren't them, but I've got some of my father's wooden sculpting palettes from when he was in school, which is really special. But these you can buy anywhere. And I also recommend, especially when I'm working on this, a light coating of wax. I put beeswax on here and then buff it off so there's no residual, nothing like that. But it just helps it slide in and out of this foam real nice. So what I'm doing with this one is I'm deepening these cracks in between the rock. That's really important for this tool. And like I say, it's got, you know, two sides to it. They're all sculpted really nice. Because I've put beeswax on, they slide over this without really leaving any residue. You know, you don't want to put wax or oil or anything like that because your paint won't stick. But that's why I say, you know, I put the wax on there, buff it off real quick, keeps paint from sticking to it, keeps it from sticking to other things. But it should not leave any residual stuff, at least of any consequence, on your painting so that your paint doesn't stick. So that is just, I wanted to do a quick video. Again, this is for my students. These are my sculpting tools that I use. And, you know, when you're sculpting, I just might go up here and just grab something. And, you know, just to get a texture, just to get something that's a variant. I do not want to use something that, like those rollers or, you know, these patterns or whatever you can buy on a, you know, a piece of acrylic and just roll your pattern on. I absolutely don't want that. There's 100% a place for it, but not in the stuff that I build, because what I'm trying to do is make a very, very unique piece that's based on a photograph supplied by my student. And this is not a mirror image of that whatsoever. But what it is teaching them how to create the effect, that kind of stone, this kind of an arrangement, what things accent it, like the wood. That's the next session that we have is creating the wood for this. And then after I do the wood, then we'll go into you know, the weathering, and because there's a lot to go on this. This is nowhere near done. So thanks very much. I thought I want to get this out. This is for someone very specific, but I think it'll help other folks too. And so my members area, both on Patreon and on my YouTube, will have some of these videos. The hub for this kind of course, this kind of training, is on my Patreon channel. So if you're interested, take a look over there. All right, we'll see ya.